They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry! With 0.6 of a second remaining.
We have meticulously gone over all the surrounding context, identified why the move was so controversial, and now it's time to discuss ultimately, with a full year now in between us and the deal, whether or not Nico's vision was justified. The next two parts are essentially this: analyzing quantifiable damage and analyzing unquantifiable damage. And let's get this right out of the way for Nico and any of his supporters out there. This is damage we're talking about. On to the numbers. We have to start with the statistics of Anthony Davis and Luka Doncic. The numbers are these. Since Luka was acquired by the Lakers, the team is 46-27 overall when he plays, a 63% winning percentage. He is averaging 33 points per game and is halfway to his second scoring title and sixth All-NBA first-team selection.
What he could do with a good 8 hours sleep. We're back with Richard here now. This guy's incredible. Now, that's 8 straight games with 30, and he doubled 30 tonight. Put it in words, Richard, what you think of what Luka is doing right now.
He's showing you that he's that once-in-a-generation player. This is the Luka that every year we believe has a chance at the MVP. And that's what makes Luka so special.
Luka got hot, particularly in the third quarter, 19 of his 60 points in the third. And they rode that energy to a victory. Now 8 in a row, 11 of their last 12. They're the hottest team in the NBA right now.
Five with 4, Luka stumbles, has it, at the buzzer! That is Luka Magic, the god, for 3. He has only lost 2. Oh, good play by Luka. Steps up ahead. Here he goes. Underneath. What a play. Showtime.
Oh, Luka. There's the anticipation. Gets to steal right between the legs of Kevin Love and then the lob.
There was Marcus Smart. Now Luka. The finish.
Point B. Luka sees him, throws it down, and LeBron does the rest.
21-10, the bench. That's what's kept Minnesota in this game.
Getting something with it. He tried to bounce it into the mix. It went right to Luka, who leans in and scores! Little magic from Luka from the outside.
Since AD was acquired by the Mavericks, the team went 16-13 overall when he played, a 55% winning percentage in a much smaller sample size. He averaged 20 points per game, his lowest total since his sophomore season with the Pelicans in 2014, and defensively, he averaged 2.8 stocks per game, his lowest total since 2016.
Love AD, he can average 28 and 12 in his sleep. When I look at you, it's the season opener. You know what I'm saying? I'm looking at him like, what do I see different? He still looked heavy. He didn't look fast. He looked a bit slower. I'm looking at him and I'm like, I need to see more because you're the dude that they said it's okay to trade Luka for. You're that guy. And if you're that guy, you got to be the dude that you won the first half of your first game as a Dallas Maverick after you got traded. You got to be that dude all the time because that's what's going to justify the move that was made.
The Mavs offense sucks, but which stat sucks the worst?
How did we even get here? It wasn't ever supposed to be this bad for the Dallas Mavericks.
Obviously, Kyrie has been out, but still, AD has played some, then he's been hurt, Lively has been hurt, but this goes beyond, like, before AD was hurt. Like, this offense was struggling.
In the NBA, there have been 17 games where teams have an offensive rating under 101 points. League average right now is 115.3. League average 115.3. There have been 17 games, only 17 games, where an NBA team has posted an offensive rating, meaning points scored per 100 possessions. So it's just like an efficiency stat. Under 101. The Mavs have 6 of them now. 6 of the 17. 6 of the 17. No other team has more than 2. The Wizards have 2. The Pelicans have 2. The Pacers have 2. The Mavs have played all 3 of those teams. They lost the 2 of them.
In the half court because they can't run any type of offense in half court and slow it down. Well, the numbers back it up because points per possession in the league The Mavs are 29th in the half-court offense. 30th is the Pacers. You know who the Pacers are missing right now? All of their point guards. Wow.
The talk was Anthony Davis is going to be this hub, and they're going to run him like he was Sabonis in Sacramento. Sabonis gets all these assists off of these handoffs. He has the ball. A ball handler runs around him. He hands the ball off to him, and he sets a screen real quick with his hip, or sets a real screen with that ball handler's defender. And you're like, all right, now you've created an advantage for that guy. Those plays are up. It was 5% last year. It's 7.3%. So it's almost 2.5 percentage points up from last year. They're getting more plays off handoffs, sure. But last year they were very good. This year they're average.
I'm not really worried about someone to run the offense. I think we got enough guys that can handle the ball and play multiple positions, but just someone to get us organized.
So right off the bat, Luka outperformed Davis on the court, and his team won more games. But guess what? These numbers do not do this disaster of a situation on the court justice. AD only suited up 29 times for the Mavericks in the end, partially due to ligament damage in his left hand that forced him out of the back half of the 2026 season in the first place. Dallas as a team is more than 10 games under 500 and has absolutely no chance of coming out of the Western Conference in 2026. Worse for Nico's vision, it has become clear that the franchise's only real option going forward is following the timeline of Cooper Flagg. If Flagg was on a team with an established point guard, spacing, and an on-court co-star, his window of contention could have opened up earlier than expected, but in execution, he is on a team with no plus point guard play, incredibly limited spacing outside of Klay Thompson, and a co-star that never returned to form.
D'Angelo Russell, who is streaky, I'll give you that, but he's shooting 31.1% from three. Cooper Flagg, 29%. PJ Washington, 28%. Anthony Davis, 27%. Caleb Martin, 25%. You go down the list, they are Najee Marshall, 15%.
I knew something was up when they tried to start Cooper Flagg at the point guard position. It was two different things. There's one thing that showed me like, what? Two things. I think they're like, yo, we need all our firepower to click ASAP. So let me know that they weren't as sure in their depth. But I was like, Cooper Flagg's never played point guard. It's a high level to have to play. And when you're sitting still, like to be able to get out and run, a lot has to go right. Your defense, like he has to be very, very, very advanced in order to be an 18-year-old to run an offense for the first time ever. So that didn't really shock me.
So like everyone else, Flagg will have to follow the same timeline of most modern rising superstars, a timeline that includes a lot of losing early on.
I mean, it's definitely tough. Like you said, like there was times at the start of the year where it was definitely taking a big toll on, I know personally me mentally, I don't want to talk for anybody else, but like it was definitely tough, Family's freaking out, like my mom especially, like she hadn't been in or seen me lose that much before, so she's worried about me. And then it's just like you're trying to just move on each night, but it's tough. Like you have to learn how to lose, I think.
But hang on, it gets worse. The Mavs are not in a position to do a lot of losing after 2026, whether they want to or not. While they have the rights to tank and participate in the 2026 draft lottery, one that will award Kansas's Darren Peterson, BYU's AJ DeBonza, and Duke's Cam Boozer to a few lucky lottery winners, Dallas lost their 2027 first-rounder to the PJ Washington trade, their 2028 first-rounder to the Daniel Gafford trade, and their 2029 first-rounder to the Kyrie Irving trade. That last one being particularly painful because it was only made necessary due to the fumbled Jalen Brunson situation. With Flagg the established priority and no contending being done, it is easy to see how in a market that saw Trae Young get moved for peanuts, the Mavs still decided to deal Davis when they did. All of this is to say that the Dallas Mavericks window of contention has slammed shut. The team is 34-56 since the day of the Luka trade, and AD has already played his last game for the Mavs as they head into what is essentially a rebuild. All of that talk of
defense wins championships
in service of a lottery basketball team. A big part of the reason the team felt pressure to move Anthony Davis amidst a lost season was because of his hefty price tag. Davis is on the hook for $54 million in 26, $58 million in 2027, and a $62 million player option in 2028.
Looking at this deal at first glance, there's not a lot that came back for picks or player-wise. So this is all really about financial flexibility for for the future. And, you know, they got rid of some contracts that were not favorable for the franchise. So
before the trade deadline, I want to talk about the one that involves Anthony Davis and the Washington Wizards. If you had Anthony Davis going to the Wizards on your chessboard coming into this trade deadline, you are a smarter man than I. But Anthony Davis gets traded to the Wizards in a multi-player deal that involves no real players of consequence besides Anthony Davis, and 2 first-round draft picks going to the Dallas Mavericks. The 2 first-round draft picks, Grant, not the greatest picks either. Like, everybody sees Golden State pick into the future, but it's a protected pick a few years from now. I looked at this as the Washington Wizards got a free player. They got Anthony Davis for nothing. What did you think?
Yeah, it was essentially a salary dump, right? Because they also attached D'Angelo Russell's contract. They attached Jaden Hardy. Right. It was a salary dump.
Part of the reason that Nico Harrison felt it necessary to move Luka in the first place was because he did not want to commit a $345 million supermax contract to someone with a, quote, questionable work ethic. Even if that questionable work ethic had dragged his team to the West Finals and Finals in 2 of the last 3 seasons. So, naturally, he swapped the questionable work ethic for a $175 million investment in a version of Anthony Davis that appears to be in clear decline. While he eventually looked better after getting picked apart by Victor Wembanyama on opening day, Davis has still looked like a shell of himself more times than not. And ultimately, that is more damaging for Nico's vision than the money or the statistics. From 2017 to 2020, AD averaged 28 points, 11 rebounds, and 3.8 stocks per game, while letting 3 All-NBA first-team selections and 1 Larry O'Brien trophy. But his career numbers have all dwindled to near career lows in 2026 during the rare times when he has been able to make it onto the court. With his 33rd birthday imminent, it seems much less likely that Davis is in a slump, and much more likely like his best days are behind him. Nico ultimately paid and boasted for a version of Anthony Davis that does not exist anymore. Just like with Kristaps Porzingis in 2022, Dallas was put in a position where they were forced to sell low on an asset in order to cut their losses and minimize the damage of a poor investment. And when I say poor investment, I mean Dumont and the Adelsons invested $207 million into the 2026 Mavericks roster that is 15 games below 500 with no hope for contention. A team with a point guard committee of D'Lo, Brandon Williams, Ryan Nembhard, and Max Christie has the 4th largest payroll in the sport. And, pre-AD salary dump, they were on the hook for a $217 million payroll in 2027. Meanwhile, the Lakers are paying $12 million less at $195 million in 2026 to pay Luka's salary while also actively contending in the Western Conference. And that is what we call quantifiable damage.
I get there, I get to Dallas, and I check into the hotel, and I go get some food, and I come back, because I didn't play right away. I come back, and they got the little mailing cards that you can write, and it was one under my door. And I pick it up with some macaroons on the door handle. I don't even eat macaroons. So I open the door, and I open the door, and I get the letter, and it read, "Dear AD, hope you liking your time in Dallas. Here in Dallas, we love Dirk, barbecue, and Luka,
Jesus,
and the Cowboys. But what we love more than all of that is championships. The boos you're going to hear are not for you."
This trade is an abject failure for the Dallas Mavericks organization. The numbers, both in the win column and on the cap sheet, say as much. But more than that, Nico Harrison horribly misunderstood the nature of his profession. His tone deafness reminds me of the recent Notre Dame story. If you weren't paying attention, the Fighting Irish, a formidable 10-2 team in 2025, was so horribly offended that it was left out of the 2026 college football playoff that the team opted out of the Pop-Tart Bowl entirely to make a larger point that they were and are above, quote, pointless bowl games that are just for, quote, fun, devoid of playoff implications.
As a team, we've decided to withdraw our name from consideration for a bowl game following the 2025 season. This comes after Notre Dame was left out of the college football playoff. The Irish were the first team out after falling behind Miami for the first time in any of this year's playoff rankings.
Okay, well, sure. Good for you, Notre Dame. But here's the thing. College football and sports exist for fun. It's a game, for Christ's sake, that exists to bring your student body and community together for 12 to 16 Saturdays a year.
And that's a party for Raider! Raider! Raider!
If you've gotten so wrapped up in the pain of defeat that you opt to rip away a 13th opportunity of fun for the fans, reps for the squad, and stats for the nerds, well then I'm afraid you've missed the point entirely.
Shows have come to the university that represents the great state of...
Professional sports are no different than college in this sense. They generate income, yes, but at their core, they exist as an outlet for fun and community building. Sports can be a uniquely galvanizing force in the culture of the cities and towns that house them, no different than what the music culture means in places like Seattle and Austin, or what the art culture means in places like Chicago and New York. This is especially true in a city like Dallas, Texas, for all the reasons we discussed in the Dallas background section. Understanding the importance and need for winning is important, and remains the ultimate goal if you play or work in these leagues, but the civic aspect of these organizations is not an inconsequential factor. The chips matter, of course, but the career lifers offer a different and sometimes greater joy to these cities. If you disagree with me, I implore you to seek out a Canadian right now and ask him what he thinks of Kawhi Leonard. And then right after that, seek out someone from Cincinnati and ask them about the career of Joey Votto and see who goes on for longer. Really, growing up with an athlete who resonates with your city in a real way is the dream for many young sports fans. Having a generation of young fans that connect with their heroes like they did in Detroit during the Barry Sanders years, Philly during the Allen Iverson years, or Seattle during the Felix Hernandez years, generates just as many fans for life as a title run might have anyways, with or without the cherry on top. The memories made during moments like rookie AI crossing up the GOAT and King Felix's perfect game are every bit as impactful and nostalgia-inducing as title runs can be for kids in the cities they happen in. And it's those lifers that, in turn, generate income for your brand the most as the years go by, win or loss. Swinging a trade to try and secure your community another NBA championship is understandable, but when that trade involves shipping away the most revered figure in your community to the point where there are literal protests in the streets, well then I'm afraid you have missed the point entirely. Remember the Where Superstars Become Legends commercial from a couple years ago? Well, you know, the only non-edited clip in that whole thing was the Luka and Dirk section. The connection needed no doctoring. It was real. He was a part of Dallas and a part of the franchise's history already through his 2018 to 2024 heroics. The ultimate goal is to build and maintain a fan base that spends dollars in your arena and turns on the television.
I started being a fan around 2009, 2010. My family never watched basketball or any sport, so kind of became a fan myself.
Now Joseph Blea is passing on that passion for the Mavs to his son. What is your name?
I'm Maverick.
Your name is Maverick?
Yeah.
And this trade led to less dollars, less eyeballs, and certainly less playoff revenue. Depriving your community of the Pop-Tart Bowl, the single most entertaining random bowl game in the sport, by the way, because the committee ranked you lower than a team that beat you, reeks of tone deafness. Trading away Luka Doncic because you think your 4D decision-making is more vital to the franchise's success, all the while calling them a fat ass to anyone who will listen after you're done kicking him to the curb, reeks of tone deafness that only hurts the fans. The human element of sports was completely and totally misunderstood by Nico. For future reference, GMs, if you're ever considering a trade that has a greater than 0% chance of inciting a public protest, then you should probably go ahead and hang up the phone. Trades that alienate fans are never the answer. The trade being a failure by a cultural estimation is one thing, but let's look over all the factors that Nico felt like he was addressing with the trade in real time.
We feel like we're built to win now as well as in the future. You know, there's some unique things about his contract that we had to pay attention to. You know, there's other teams that were loading up, you know, that he was going to be able to decide make his own decision at some point of whether he wants to be here or not, whether we want to supermax him or not, or whether he wants to opt out. Jay Kidd and I, we've had a vision in the culture that we want to create since we've been here. And the players that we're bringing in, we believe exemplify that. And, we think defense wins championships. And we're bringing in one of the best two-way players in the league. We believe that it sets us up to win not only now, but also in the future. And when we win, I believe the frustration will go away.
Did Anthony Davis improve Dallas's odds as a real-time contender? Answer, no. In fact, the trade represented the real-time end of their window of contention. Did not paying Luka Doncic the Supermax free up their financial flexibility and put them in a better spot going forward? No. In fact, they paid more money for a vastly less competitive roster in 2026. Did they prolong their window of contention in the future? No. See answer for question number 1. Did they create a culture? No. In fact, they alienated the only free agent who had ever chosen Dallas for the vibes. And lastly, did they endear themselves to the fans when they came around to see the vision? No. In fact, the trade may have single-handedly erased a generation of Mavs fans. Likewise, the entire landscape of the Lakers franchise has been shifted away from a 41-year-old LeBron James towards a 26-year-old Luka in his prime of primes. The team's impending opportunity to build around him with cap space available once the King calls it a career makes the Lakers' future look as bright as ever. They are now being led by the best scorer of his generation, and if you don't believe me, here is Luka and the number of seasons in which he has averaged 30 points per game or more, next to the number for the 5 best players of the last generation, next to their total career numbers of seasons in which they averaged 30 points per game or more.
The joy that I took out of watching this Lakers team this week, I can't tell you how much I loved watching them compete the last 3 games, and Luka especially. Luka's way he approached this game was just absolutely awe-inspiring.
Listen, if I close my eyes, I can see him a combination of Jason Kidd and Magic Johnson, right? And what we've seen is since the trade, and there was that hesitancy with Luka here, Austin Reeves, basically had the ball in his hands a lot. Luka's running the show right now, right? The ball is in his hands. LeBron has deferred. These two have shown that they can work together.
You look at overtime, who scores the first 5 points? You got Luka with a 2-pointer, then you have Luka coming down with a 3-pointer. 5 points right there, the Lakers went up. And then LeBron James, when you need him the most, 12 points in the fourth quarter in overtime. I really like this basketball team right now.
The Lakers currently sit 10 games over 500, understandably considering themselves contenders on some level, so long as they have Luka available.
Luka is crazy, man.
Luka can get a shot off on anybody in the league.
It looks so effortless.
He's mastered at 23, 24, 25 years old.
He's definitely one of the smartest players that I've seen. And then he hits you with the step back, and then he's almost always open.
My point was saying that Luka could get a shot over anybody in the league. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's always been his pace. It's never been a game be like, okay, well, you can speed me up. He can speed me up. Okay, this bigger guy can be more physical. Okay, the smaller guy can get up underneath me. It's like he moves at his own pace. And he's never, ever been on the floor where he's allowed someone to dictate where they're going to put him on the floor. It's always been the opposite, you know? And for us, when we all working off of that, we just got to stay ready. Obviously we've seen throughout his career, like there's plays and passes that certain guys that in the league history have ever been able to make. For us, we all just have to make sure that we continue to stay ready, especially when you're going against handsy teams, athletic teams that try to speed you up. We always have to keep our head on the swivel because you just never know. You just never know when the ball may find you, and that's a good thing. That's keeping the defense off balance, and that's a great thing to have that.
Sports are supposed to bring us closer together and make us feel, even for a moment, like we're all on the same page as a community. The damage done by ripping away a uniquely passionate and sophisticated fan base's single most galvanizing force, making your youngest generation of fans unable to trust again, removing yourself from a bare minimum of 2 playoff runs, and handing said galvanizing force to one of your fan base's arch rivals, well, that damage is just unquantifiable. The good-ish news for the fan base is, I just don't see either of those conspiracy theories being true. If the Rachel Phelps theory is true, and the Dumont and Adelson family really do want to move the team to Las Vegas, then they probably would not have then wanted the number 1 overall pick too then, right? That might make them more competitive, and thus, harder to relocate. they probably also wouldn't then commit the 4th largest payroll in the league too for any reason, right? It just doesn't seem logical. It seems more logical that someone with quotes like these,
tough decisions are never easy,
legitimately would have been caught off guard by 12 Texas House members immediately shooting down legal casino gambling. Now, the Luka for flag quid pro quo collusion from the league office to boost the Lakers' TV draw is easier to wrap your mind around, but I still don't quite see it. It is true that the Lakers have historically just sort of wound up with Wilt, Kareem, and Pau Gasol, all at times when the league was more or less desperate for some national TV attention, and it is also true that Nico and Rob Pelinka, the Lakers' GM, have been literal best friends since 2003. Keep in mind that Nico was at Nike and Pelinka was Kobe's agent during the negotiation and execution of the greatest line of basketball shoes of the 21st century. But with the Lakers already having LeBron James, I kind of doubt that Adam Silver was really that desperate to get LA more eyeballs. And if Pelinka and Harrison are really that close to the point of active league collusion, why would they concoct a scheme that would cost one of them their job and entire reputation? Maybe one day Pablo Torre will unearth that Nico is secretly getting 0.1% of the back end of all Lakers revenue from the Luka trade on under the table or something. But I kinda doubt the guy getting booed out of Dallas bars.
Whoa! Whoa!
Nico? Nico. What's up, man? Good to meet you. We all still hate you. All right, good. Good talk, brother.
Do better.
And confused Steph for Seth Curry in a pitch was sharp enough to hatch and execute, with an accomplice or not, that high level of a scheme. Reports indicate that Pelinka was genuinely shocked when Nico pitched this idea to him in January of 2025. Pelinka knew exactly what Luka brings to an NBA franchise.
You know, it's interesting if all of us watch Luka play. He has a combination of basketball joy and killer instinct, which is really rare. That was number 8, number 24. And I think learning lessons from that mentality are to stay in the moment. And so I don't think of it in terms of shock, surprise. I think of it in, okay, this is coming at me. It's like a game. You know, maybe a blitz is coming at Luka. He's not going to be shocked. He's going to stay in the moment, figure out the read, and make the play. And so when the opportunity came to me, that was sort of my mindset, is to, okay, this is coming. This is a concept that came to me. Now, how do I process this mentally to get the deal completed?
After looking back on all this information, to me, this situation looks a lot less conspiracy and a lot more like incompetence and hubris.
Yeah, I mean, when you trade a guy of Luka's caliber, you're not taking it lightly. So we discussed everything, but we really feel that defense is our calling card and what we're going to hang our hat on. And when we had an opportunity to get one of the best two-way players in the league, we jumped at that opportunity.
Nico's core understanding of his roster was inherently flawed. To Nico, the Mavs had success from 2022 to 2024 not because Luka Doncic was great, but because someone like him was brave enough to sell Kristaps Porzingis at the lowest value of his entire career.
Porzingis way outside, knocks down another.
Execute a trade for a star few others were lining up for, draft Derek Lively II, and swing a deal for PJ and Gafford.
Make sure to push him to get the best out of him, but he really does have it on both sides of the ball.
Really, the Mavs had been successful through early 2025 because of two main factors. The first being luck. They were very lucky that Kyrie, a 30-year-old with a checkered injury history, had stayed healthy long enough to make the world forget about the Jalen Brunson fiasco for a minute. And they were very, very lucky that Kyle Kuzma had denied a trade to Dallas before the pivot to the PJ and Gafford moves. The other factor leading to his success, ironically, was Luka and his superhuman ability to carry mediocre at best lineups through a playoff series. Nico genuinely thought it was his decision-making that drove the Mavericks from 2022 to 2025.
Why shouldn't you be fired?
Well, one, I think I've done a really good job here.
And that thought process led to the trade and genuine shock at the fan reaction.
Bring him back! He's not back! Bring him back! He's not back! Bring him back! He's not back!
Which, in turn, led to endless press conferences where he clearly figured if they all just hear how smart I am, they'll get that I'm right. But alas, the opposite was proven.
I don't do anything that's scary. I think everything that we do, we put a lot of work into it. We study it, and we restudy it, and we go back, and I understand the magnitude of it. So the easiest thing for me to do is do nothing, and everyone would praise me for doing nothing. But we really believe in it, and time will tell if I'm right. We could have been better, as I look back on it. I did see the outrage, just maybe not to the degree of what that it actually ended up being. I'm an optimistic person, and I move by faith, not by fear.
You know, you said defense win championships. We saw the Nuggets 2 years ago. I mean, they finished 15th in defense the regular season. Is kind of the one of the 30 guys who runs an NBA team. What's just your analysis of how, I guess, that Nuggets team won the championship?
I don't want to dismiss your question, but I'm not concerned about the Nuggets. I feel like we have a championship caliber team when we're whole, and we're going to hang our hat on defense. We're going to be one of the best defensive teams in the league, and I think that's going to be our calling card.
Luka was the single force keeping the Mavs in contention, and assuming that anyone else could carry that burden was a horrible misunderstanding of the situation.
You mentioned you think this will work in the short term and the long term. Short term makes great sense. How do you see this working out well for the organization in the long term?
Well, I think the long term is the time frame. I think he fits our time frame. If you pair him with Kyrie and the rest of the guys, he fits right along with our time frame to win now and win in the future. And the future to me is 3-4 years from now. The future 10 years from now, I don't know. I don't think they probably bury me and Jay by then, or we bury ourselves.
Here's an analogy. Imagine if in 2007, some hotshot became the new showrunner for The Office, and right as the show was about to hit its stride, they immediately swapped out Steve Carell with someone else because they felt like the guy was just too darn awkward and they needed a more stable star.
I declare bankruptcy!
Any rational person would hear that sentence and think, no, you can't get rid of Michael Scott. The ensemble is great, but there's just no way it'd be the same without Steve Carell.
Okay, well, a good trick is to pump to the tune of Staying Alive by the Bee Gees. Do you know that song?
Yes, I do. I love that song. First I was afraid, I was petrified.
No.
And you would be right. How many of you out there are going out of your way to rewatch the Robert California episodes? Yeah, I didn't think so. Well, that's what the short-lived AD era Mavs were. The basketball equivalent of Season 8 of The Office. There was literally no precedent for someone that great getting moved that young in league history. Now the following is true. Some stars get traded very early in their careers, well before they reach their peaks. Some stars demand trades in their primes to maximize their title chances. And some stars get traded for financial reasons. But the Luka trade was none of this. Luka was not a rising star, he was a bona fide superstar who had already established himself as one of the 3-ish best players in the league. He had not demanded a trade or offered any reason to suggest that he was unhappy in Dallas. And the Mavs spent more money on their roster without Luka than they had with him. The only other players that great to get moved in their prime were both moved more than a half century ago, when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was traded to the Lakers and when Wilt Chamberlain was traded to the 76ers, as each were entering their age 28 season. The only other players in league history of Doncic's caliber to switch teams that young were LeBron James, who did so voluntarily via free agency, and Moses Malone, who bounced around in large part due to the chaos of the NBA-ABA merger of the late 1970s. And yet, Nico traded Luka Doncic in his prime at 25 without a trade demand, because
defense wins championships.
The conspiracies are fun to talk about, but really, the signs of dysfunction were there. The old powers from the last semblance of the good old days had been stripped of power and were replaced with figures with no background in the game. There was Jalen Brunson's fumbled free agency, Rick Carlisle's messy departure, the THJ extension, and so on and so forth. Looking back at the whole picture, It seems a lot more plausible that the Luka trade was just another example of a dysfunctional organization making a dysfunctional decision. It is ironic that one of the reasons that Nico offered for immediate justification was ever to build a culture.
We've had a vision in the culture that we want to create since we've been here. And the players that we're bringing in, we believe exemplify that.
Considering that the move proved that the Mavericks were operating at the time as a full-blown dictatorship. Nico clearly became way too full of himself after the PJ, Kyrie, and Gafford trades worked out, and let the power turn him into a borderline crazy person. Even though the Kyrie trade was a desperation move brought about by the self-inflicted Brunson wound. And I know we had a lot of fun saying that Kyrie was better than Brunson in 2024, but as the years go on, wow. What a mistake. Only by deluding yourself into thinking that you're the smartest man in Dallas can you then delude yourself into thinking that you're more important to the Mavericks than Luka Doncic. Incompetence and hubris. Those are the two factors that ultimately led to the Wonder Boy donning a Lakers jersey. You might still find all of this too far-fetched to chalk up simply to incompetence, but I remind you that this is the ownership group that thinks they're getting casino gambling legal in Texas.
We're going to roll on to Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who says casino gambling probably won't be coming to Texas anytime soon. In an interview with our sister station in Dallas, he said the issue simply doesn't have a lot of support. And for part of that, he says it's the casino operators who really can blame themselves.
They've never worked the vote. They've come in and spent millions and millions and millions of dollars. And they just think, well, magically it happens. It doesn't.
So really, unless there was a second incompetent executive on the grassy knoll, I just don't see a world where the conspiracy theories have legs. Instead, it's a sad example of what hubris and unchecked power can do to a sports town. I want to bring back Nico's catchphrase to the forefront one last time.
And, we think defense wins championships.
You see, this is one of those nice-sounding coach-speak phrases that sound really cool if you're trying to convince someone who is not paying close attention that you know ball. But I was paying attention. Let's deep dive this phrase so we can all understand why using it to justify a trade of Luka Doncic for a 31-year-old Anthony Davis makes no sense. The phrase defense wins championships is one of those phrases that has become so ingrained in American culture that many people don't actually know where it comes from. Kind of like,
do you know the Klingon proverb that tells us revenge is a dish that is best served cold?
Or,
fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
Or,
he taught me in this room. He taught me, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer.
But the phrase is generally attributed to legendary Alabama head coach Bear Bryant. In the 60s and 70s, Bryant used the defense wins championships mentality to guide the Crimson Tide to 6 national championships. While the mentality clearly led to a lot of success for Bryant in Tuscaloosa, some important distinctions should be made between the games of basketball and football. You see, basketball is a game originally created to promote Christian morals and teamwork.
Football is a 20th century technological struggle.
Basketball is played on a court in a nice, air-conditioned arena.
Football is played on a gridiron in a stadium, sometimes called Soldier Field or War Memorial Stadium.
More importantly, football is a sport where at the professional and collegiate levels, the playoffs take place in the winter. Therefore, teams built for cold weather defensive wars have often been those that are the most successful. This has been the case as long as football has been played, and guys like Bill Parcells, Bill Belichick, and Tom Landry all used that defense wins championships mentality to earn themselves spots in the Hall of Fame.
Not necessarily maul you, but we're going to play our position the way we're supposed to play it, the way Coach Landry wants us to play it.
Knock him down now, okay? Knock your outside men down.
But basketball, on the other hand, is a completely different sport entirely. Defense is important, of course, but in the NBA, it is the teams with the most depth and, more importantly, star power that typically find themselves winning the NBA Finals. Where football has 22 men on the field on each individual down, basketball only has 10. Therefore, the best player on the court carries much more control over the movement of the other 9 players around him at any given moment. Teams in the NBA rarely make the finals without at least a top 10-ish defense, but it is much, much rarer for a team to make the NBA finals without a top 5 player in the game, something that Luka was and AD was not. It is the teams with a defensive identity, depth, and a top 5 player to boot that are the teams that have the most sustained success in the NBA. Therefore, even if your best player is a less than adequate defender, the play that makes the most sense is to create a roster around that superstar that is able to make up for his defensive shortcomings. In turn, your offensive juggernaut picks up the offensive slack for those defense-first guys around the margins. There is a term for this called balance, or if you prefer, teamwork. Teams built in this way have dominated the NBA for years, unless you want to pretend that the late 80s Lakers, Splash Brothers era Warriors, and hey, look at that, 2011 Mavericks never existed. Cuban understood this during the 2018 draft, which is how Luka wound up in Dallas in the first place. What wins NBA titles the most is premier players, and more granularly, premier shot makers. And as we have discussed at length, Luka had already proven himself to be one of the most uniquely gifted shot makers in the history of the league, all before his 26th birthday. You could see the imbalance of the roster immediately as Dallas's spacing went from top tier to 2021 Knicks right after the Luka trade because AD just could not carry the offensive load that Luka was carrying. Likewise, none of the defensive-minded guys that had been brought in to play around Luka over the last few seasons could create enough to make the offense viable, especially without Kyrie. It was an incredibly bold assumption from Nico's point of view to presume that players like Lively, PJ, and Gafford would have remotely the same impact, devoid of Luka's gravity and playmaking ability. When Brian Windor said,
And this is an opportunity now that they've been trying to get to for years and that they were dreaming of when they made that Kyrie Irving trade, when they made those trades at midseason. This team has really come together fast, but come together very well. They got something really special going on here.
They were not gelling because of the trades. They were gelling because of Luka. In these highlights, who do we really think is creating the scoring opportunity? The guy finishing off the lob? Or the guy being stared at by the entire opposing defense, breaking down the defense, and putting precision passes in the perfect spots?
It up ahead to Lively, and then a long, vicious pass, and what a finish!
It's amazing what turned the game around.
And especially now with the opportunity to get another one. Extra possession. Lob! Doncic to Gafford, 7-0 Mavs.
Each of those players were utterly dependent on Luka's creation for them to get the best out of their skill sets. Without him, each has looked noticeably less effective since the trade. So really, the trade sapped the team of its most important asset while also minimizing the value of nearly every other asset on the roster. Goes to show what assumptions do.
You make an arse out of you and me, yeah? And that right there is another example of how our English and y'all's English sometimes do not jive, isn't it?
Maybe you think that Luka will never be able to stay in good enough shape to defend at a high enough level even to be hid on a championship team. And that's a fair opinion to have.
You can trade Luka Doncic. I can go with you on that. I can even go with the Mavericks. I'm not saying I will, but you can make me believe Luka's not the guy to get you by himself. But what I can't get on board with is the return in the trade.
Yes.
That I have a hard line on. But if we can argue about where Luka can do it or not, I don't know. He's young. Maybe he can, maybe he can't. Mavericks know more than I do. They said he can't. They traded him. I have an issue with, couldn't you get a little bit more?
And this is Nico Harrison.
The sentiment that Bob has expressed is the sentiment that has been expressed to me by team executive after team executive after team executive for the last couple of months. Okay, trade Luka, fine. The return, not fine.
And we've all maybe bought or sold a house. When you buy or sell a house, you don't invite one buyer over and say, what will you pay?
Well, you do if you get a maximum price.
Sure. So that's you knock on the door and say, I'll pay you more than, we have to take that. Yes. But in this situation, when you say AD and a first, you go, well, I got to open this thing up.
You mentioned, I mean, was your son upset about the trade?
Yeah, I mean.
Were you?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And I've said this before. If if the Mavs are going to trade Luka, that's one thing. Just get a better deal. No disrespect to Anthony Davis, but get 3. If I still firmly believe if we had gotten 4 unprotected number ones and Anthony Davis and Max Christie, this would be a different conversation.
But even then, swapping him for a 31-year-old Anthony Davis because defense wins championships doesn't make sense because it completely killed the balance of the team. Anthony Davis in 2025 was still an elite defender, but he was by no means a top 5 player in the league the way Luka was and is. Because of this, the offense was more hindered than the defense was enhanced.
Now, the Mavs defense has actually been fine. And it kind of been a strength. I did go through the schedule, and they haven't played the strongest teams for sure. But the Mavs are 6th in the NBA in defense. Their goal was to be top 3. We were like, all right, if they got to be at least top 10 and have like a average or okay offense, and they'll be fine this year. And then we'll wait till Kyrie comes back, and maybe they can do something special. Cooper Flagg takes a really big step forward during the season. Derek Lively takes a step forward. Anthony Davis stays healthy. We're like, all right, well, then the Mavericks will be all right. None of those things have happened. None of those things have happened. The Mavs defense has been good. Their offense has been so atrociously bad that it makes absolutely no sense. Absolutely no sense. How bad it is.
The whole roster hierarchy was thrown out the window. All to satisfy a phrase coined in a different sport under a completely different set of circumstances. And all to fix the defense of a team that had already ranked in the top 10 in the league in points allowed per possession for most of the 2025 season pre-Luka trade. Yes, by and large, defense does indeed win championships, but using the phrase to justify a trade of Luka was utterly ridiculous and honestly more anger-inducing the longer you sit and think about it.
You say repeatedly that defense wins championships. Are you saying it was impossible to build a roster that included Luka Doncic that was strong enough defensively to win a championship?
No, I think it's really doubling down on defense. And like I said, when we had the opportunity to get Anthony Davis, who is one of the best two-way players in the league, we jumped at that opportunity.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Okay, a simple wrong would have done just fine, but...
You gotta respect the writers like Tim McMahon for sitting there during those press conferences with straight faces while being given the line on repeat like they were trying to get logic out of Marshawn Lynch.
How about the effort of the offensive line to keep pushing against the defensive attack so aggressively?
Yeah. Anything else other than yeah today?
Yeah. Hold on one second. Yeah. Maybe. I don't know.
There are NBA teams lacking top-tier star power that have won NBA finals on much more defined defense-first mindsets. But these teams are much few and far between. And typically, they come with someone like Isaiah Thomas on the roster anyways. Again, balance is the word here. There is no example of the 2000 Baltimore Ravens winning a title with Trent Dilfer under center in the NBA to point to, unless you're just really committed to hating on Chauncey Billups, a guy whose nickname was Mr. Big Shot. Nico and his smug smile clearly felt he was spitting bars when he dropped defense wins championships at that first presser. But really, for the reasons we've just discussed, it was an utterly indefensible way to justify his actions. So for all the non-football coaches execs out there, please know that there is more context to defense wins championships than none at all. And know that if the quote is compelling you to sell low on the face of your franchise, you've probably gone too far. The same way that if Michael Corleone's keep your friends close but your enemies closer quote is compelling you to join Al-Qaeda, you've probably gone too far. Knowing definitively a year later that this move was every bit of the nightmare that we thought it would be in real time for the Mavericks, brings up the discussion of who really is responsible. Well, I guess blame really kind of goes around. Mark Cuban empowered Nico Harrison in the first place, and then sold him to a governor who he must have learned during negotiations had zero ball knowledge.
Where are you and what is happening? What's going through your head?
I'm at an event in Florida.
Okay.
I get a text from Nico, call me. And so I'm like, okay. I call him, and I thought he was telling me that he's thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Then I realized it was done.
Yeah, it's just done.
And then it's like, nothing I can do.
Yeah.
It's not my party.
Yeah.
So I just, I wasn't happy about it, but, it's Nico's decision. I respect that he did what he thought was right.
Mm-hmm.
And now we are where we are, and that's in the past. I mean, maybe it'll be his Steve Nash, and, Luka will go on to win 2 MVPs.
Yeah.
I don't know, as long as, because after we traded Nash, we went to the finals, and then we won the finals.
Oh, yeah.
So as long as it turns out that way, I don't care.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Yeah.
And
you hired him.
I hired him.
Do you regret it?
Yeah, in hindsight now, it was a mistake, but whatever. But
Michael Finley must have played some role in stroking Nico's ego and perpetuating the idea that Luka's conditioning could never improve. After all, it was Finley who snatched the poor guy's beer after winning the Western Conference.
Now we'll open it up to questions. We just ask that you keep it focused on today's moves around the 2026 NBA trade deadline and where the organization is headed as we go forward. So please just raise your hand.
Jason Kidd must have had some chance to lie down on the tracks and say, if you do this, I quit, and balked. Like what Ernie Accorsi did when his owner wanted to trade John Elway. Either that, or he was on board too.
But when you look at the vision of the team and what Nico wants to build, I truly support that, and truly believe that the players that we're getting are the ones that can help us achieve that, and that's to win a championship.
But I think there was animosity between our former general manager and some people on Luka's team, his agent and some of the people that worked around them. I don't think they got along. I think there were issues that, J. Kidd had coached with Anthony Davis and was close to him, and Nico was close to AD, right, since he was like 13 years old. And so I think, you talk about confirmation bias, there was some of that as well. But, that doesn't justify it for, our coach and our general manager to stand up and trade our best player.
I was not part of the process, and I found I was informed at the 11th hour, and that's the truth.
But as the leader of the team, it seems like if anyone could have saved this from happening, it would have been Kidd. Perhaps the most obvious man to blame is the governor who greenlit the whole thing, Patrick Dumont.
One of the things that I think has to be marveled at here is how badly ownership miscalculated the importance of the emotional relationship that a region has with this player, so that the betrayal is so seismic that you're firing somebody 8 months late for what they did 8 months ago because you underestimated what the reaction would be.
Let's take a quick look back at his earlier quote from right after the trade.
So, tough decisions are never easy. And part of leadership is looking at risk and looking at all the factors of a decision and being willing to act at that time and look to the long term and not only think about the short term or how it may be received immediately, but to think about the long-term benefits and what it may allow you to achieve if given all the right considerations. And I think for us, going into the trade deadline last year, we were not competitive. If you recall, we were not a playoff-bound team. And we were able to do some things to reconstruct the roster and enable the team to become very competitive. And after the trade deadline last year, we actually had the best record in basketball, which was a big accomplishment. And we got to the championship games, and we didn't win. And so we had to decide, how do we get better? What can we do to improve our team? And so we looked at our trajectory during the season and realized that we did not get better. But the teams that we competed against, some of which we beat, did get better. And ultimately, when you look at the Eastern Conference, after we were to get through the Western Conference, if we're so fortunate, you would have to beat some very formidable teams, including one that we lost to, which actually got better. So this was a decision about the future. If you look at our roster today and who we have, we feel like we position ourselves to be incredibly competitive against the best teams in the NBA. And if you're a fan of basketball, I'll just throw that out there, you have Kyrie Irving, Klay Thompson, PJ Washington, Anthony Davis, and either Daniel Gafford or Derek Lively as your starting five. That's going to put fear into a lot of teams in the league if we can get going.
Okay, now let's pick apart why this quote makes zero sense. Now, when the Mavs got to the trade deadline in 2024 and 2025, they were struggling, yes, this is true. But the context in which they were struggling was wildly different. In 2024, the Mavs were struggling because they lacked depth, which they addressed with the PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford trades. In 2025, the Mavs were struggling because Luka Doncic was injured and not playing. Not because Luka Doncic was a fat. Before Luka's injury, the Mavs were surefire contenders and the reigning Western Conference champs. Only after his calf injury did the team look pedestrian. Seeing a 25-year-old Luka Doncic miss a dozen games and immediately deciding to trade him for a 31-year-old who was healthy that specific week was them looking at the short term. And as far as the not being concerned about how it is received part, well, when 99% of the people around you objectively think a decision you let happen is insane, well then you're probably being had.
I'll say one thing and I'm going to turn it over to Nico because he deserves the credit. Nico saw this all the way. And the great thing is he has an unbelievable amount of talent in terms of doing his job. And that's the reason why we want to have him around for as long as he wants to be here. Love Nico. He's done phenomenal work. He's a top leader in the organization. He helps establish the culture of organization in a very strong way, that winning focus, that determination to be tough and actually get things done and win. And so I think when you look at what we did and look at what the team did to sort of recharacterize itself and make those trades, that was under Nico's watch, and we were successful for a reason.
He talks about the game like Jennifer Garner talks about football in draft day. It's clearly not a subject he is remotely familiar with. That monologue was obviously fed to him by Nico, the man who Dumont legitimately trusted, for worse and worse, as a basketball genius of some kind. He did not know how absolutely ridiculous that quote would sound to anyone familiar with the situation, which makes it seem clearer as to how he allowed the trade to happen in the first place. All we really know is who had zero say, with that being Mark Cuban and Dirk Nowitzki. These are the two guys who were the most directly responsible for the Mavericks culture evolving into what it became in the first place. And we know that they had no say based on how they immediately began to distance themselves from the trade, leading to quotes like these.
Oh yeah, let's trade one of the top 3 players in the NBA, right? I wouldn't have done it, but it's done, and so.
I felt like, I played with him in my last season. We've gotten close. I've tried to mentor him. I try to help him as much as I can in the last few years, and he's a good kid. So I felt like I had to go out there and support him in this new chapter because, I think it was reported that he was pretty obviously down and disappointed how it went down, and so I wanted to be there for him. I wanted to be there for his family and show support, but you guys saw my face. It was weird. It was surreal to see him play for the Lakers, and so at the end of the day, I'll never be a Lakers fan, but it was always be a Luka fan. Yeah.
That 27% of the Mavericks that Cuban still owns clearly did not entitle him to any say on basketball decisions. Obviously, Nico was the brains of the operation, but all of the yes men and organization members higher up on the food chain also carry some blame for letting everything unfold without seemingly any pushback.
Things like that. But what are some of the worst case scenarios? Like if you can't acquire the assets to build a winning team?
I think we have the assets already. It's just building around them. I'm sorry, but I'm not capable of looking at the worst case scenario. It's everything about what we do is about how do we continue to get better. We're coming back already with what we feel is a championship caliber team. So now we'll use the draft, we'll use free agency to add to that.
Ultimately, it's these quotes that are the real reason I can't buy the conspiracies. The more we hear Dumont and Nico talk, the more it's clear that neither understands the game at a high or even intermediate level. Does Nico sound like a mastermind? Or a stuffy boardroom exec who happened to have a one-sided infatuation with players he worked with at Nike?
Normally when teams change ownership, they bring their own people in, and Patrick and the Allison family, they've adopted me as their own. So I really appreciate that, and it's just been great. One of the things about Patrick and I, our conversations, we talk about leadership, we talk about investing in the community, we talk about culture, and it's all the things that I believe in. And so it reminds me of my old days in Nike. I guess that's his corporate background.
Nico had done a fine job through February 1st, 2025, but his finals roster was closing must-win games with Josh Green and Tim Hardaway Jr. on the court. So, Jerry West, this man was not.